Hey, so several months ago, I started using this app called Tandem. Now, Tandem is an app that's mainly for language learning and exchanging with people across the world. It's got two main features: chatting and parties. Chatting for texting people, and parties, which is kind of the tandem name for the groups that allow for conversations to be had with people from anywhere. Now, I started using this app for mainly German and later on practicing my Spanish. But then it hit me that I didn't have to only practice in those languages, so I started talking in English with people across the world. And I noticed that a lot of people have some really cool perspectives. As I was starting this, I really wasn't that great at talking to people, but over time I got more comfortable. And the wealth of conversations I've been able to have on this app has been absolutely amazing, to say the least. And I had this great idea to share with anyone who wants to listen to some of the stuff that we've been talking about. So if you're into that, then check this out. My name's Anthony. People also call me T3.
So this is a party that I started that was kind of experimental. I don't know if you're interested in this, but I wrote everything up in the title. So it says the world is changing, but what does that mean for families, education, values, etc.? Let's talk. It's advanced English. And this chat room may be recorded. And the reason why I wrote that is because I may decide to use it for a podcast, and I want everyone participating to be aware that that's what I would do, or that's
Wow.
what I
Okay.
might do. I don't know. I've never done
Okay.
anything like this before, but it's a really interesting topic, and I've had a lot of practice in hosting parties at this point.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay. So you're from South Korea, if I had to guess?
Yeah, I'm from South Korea, but I live in Canada right now,
Canada. Which territory?
Ontario. It's like close to Toronto, but I live in a small city called London.
It's called London, like in England.
Yeah, not in United Kingdom, but it's like in Ontario.
I didn't know that there was a London, Ontario.
Me either. Like before I come here.
Wow. Well, it's nice to meet you. If I gotta say your name one more time, Shunya.
Sohyun, but you can call me
Soyeon.
Jinso.
No. Soyeon.
Yeah.
I'll get it right. I'll get it right. If it's the last
It's
thing
fine.
I do.
It's good.
It's
Good
really
to start.
it's really important to me to get people's names right.
Okay.
It really
Appreciate
is.
it.
So, the world is changing, as I mentioned in the title above. But one thing that comes to mind when I think of a changing world is families. Because if you're a parent, for example, and you have a kid, one thing that's really going to concern you is like, or let's say you're a parent and your kid's on the way, like they haven't been born yet. So to me, if your finances are in order, then to me, one of the concerns is where to raise your kids. And if you're really open, like you're willing to do anything, let's say, for the betterment of what's best for the family, all that, then to me, a lot of families probably think, not every family, but a lot of families probably are in conflict with themselves which countries would be best to live in.
Yeah. In my opinion, personally, it depends on like, which country people are you gonna marry with, because like, I'm Korean, but I live in Canada, so like I can marry a Canadian or either Korean or like any kind of affinities, but we have like own languages and we cannot fully understand like unless we're not same we don't come from like same countries. I mean, so like if I marry with Koreans, like I think it will be Korea will be the best place to raise my kids, but I would go to another country to have more experience for my kids and for myself too. And like if I marry with Canadian, maybe I will just stick to here because like it's their background, and I met my husband in here. So I don't know. It depends. But how about you? How do you think?
I would say I'm pretty pragmatic. I don't know how much influence the country would have over me in a particular situation. I think some of it is a bit spontaneous. There are elements that are, and what I mean by spontaneous is elements that you wouldn't be able to predict. And I wonder how much of an influence that would have on my decision making. Like, you never know. But ultimately, I would probably say that um, if I was married and I was in a relationship already, that would be a lot different than before I'm in the relationship. Because you mentioned, well, if I married a Korean guy, if I married a Canadian guy, but that's before you get into the relationship. and then once you're in the relationship, to me, it looks like your priorities shift. And suddenly the fact that you're in a relationship has a lot to do with where you would be staying or where you would decide to stay.
Yeah, I can tell. Like for now, like I will stay in Canada. I like here. I like the vibe. I like that I can learn another language and I can meet a lot of people. Like it's multiculturalism, and they accept a lot of peoples who didn't come from Canada or like that. But it depends on my partner's like if he wants to live in another countries, then I would consider, and like if it's like valid or not, I like think about it. But I think the best way to live for now for me is to live in here or go back to Korea for my families.
Are you saying that as a person who's in a relationship or a person who's not?
um who's in?
Okay. And so your partner's Korean?
um No, he isn't. He's from he's from Canada, but he likes Korean culture, and he also likes to live in Korea. So he's really open minded, but it's not like stable relationship. So I'm really young, and he's really young too. So uh, like I don't know.
That's interesting. The first thing that strikes me, or a question that I might have to that, is that, okay, well, given that Korean culture seems to be pretty conservative, at least from the perspective of someone coming from the West, is there not the danger of the fact that he's an outsider and that maybe it, it might be perceived based on the culture from what I know? And what do I know? I don't know anything about Korean culture. But it seems like from conversations I've had with people that outsiders are not as welcome as a Korean partner if you were in a relationship. I don't know if any of that makes sense. Are you following, or should I formulate that another way?
um I think I got it, but like you mean that like in Korea or in Canada?
In Korea.
Oh yeah. So like in Korea, like a lot of people are conservative. You said before, like one of my friends here, he's like black, and he went to Korea for vacation, and Seoul, there's a lot of foreigners who want to travel to Korea or like for business or whatever. But like outside of the Seoul, like people are so not friendly with foreigners, and like one of like old person, like he tried to like take a picture of him, and like he asked like where are you from, and when he said like I'm from Canada, and he replied like, why are you from Canada? You're black. I think you're African or like that. And I was like so shocked. So like I think like still Koreans, they are not like that open minded compared to Westerns. So like when you think about like Korea, like to raise the kids, they will be like still not as open minded as like US people, but it's good environment to raise a child as a good kid. Like I mean the environment to study or to get a good job, like Asian culture, the study is.
Okay, well, and this is deviating from the original topic a little bit to a degree, but that's fine because I'm curious now about Korean culture specifically and what that would look like. And so, I guess what I would say to that, as not necessarily a critique of what you're saying, but one thing that I would say is that to me, as as cultures become more open, then they accommodate different kinds of people, which allows them to be more open, or allows the potential for people to be more open. It seems like cultures, the dominant cultures of Asia that everyone is aware of, they seem to be more conservative than other parts of the world. And so what that seems to have meant is that they're not really used to foreigners to the degree that other countries are. Because, well, in the US, it's not just that you have a lot of tourists, is that there's also a culture of accommodating other people and allowing them the chance to become, let's say, American. And so in Korea or China or Japan, it seems like that's different. There's not really, if I want to go to South Korea and become Korean, that's not really um, that's not really possible. At least not in the same way that it's possible to become a United States citizen and then American in that way, or the same way that you can come to Canada and become Canadian. Right? It's different, and the reason why it's different is because they're making efforts to preserve their culture, and part of that means preserving their race. And so they might perceive anyone outside of that to be somewhat of a threat to that, although they'll allow for tourists because that helps with their economy, and there's globalization and world trade. So it seems to me that the skepticism or the skepticism regarding people who are in their country, it stems from that. And that's what that is to me, at least. It's a combination of ignorance, because to the degree that there are less people of a certain background in your or set of character traits in your countries that you're not used to, you're going to probably treat them a certain way based on biases that you may have, whether it be from media or what you've heard from the neighbor down the street. And so when I hear about things of that nature, in this case, it was the gentleman who was Canadian and sort of like an African descent, then that seems to be what that is. People call that racism, but it's more like bias. And we're all discriminatory to a degree, and we all have biases. But people in cultures that are that conservative probably have a lot more biases, and so they're likely to be more skeptical of others that don't look like them. But that's besides the point. It's just something I would have mentioned to that point that you said.
Okay, so you mean talk about like bias?
Yeah, well, bias is a part of life. I mean, we all have them. It's just that to the extent that cultures are less open, the Korean cultures and other cultures in in Asia famously don't really allow outsiders the ability to become one of their own, let's say part of the tribe, but rather outsiders that can simply trade, take part in the economy, visit and see the sights. Um, Whereas the Western cultures are different in that way. If you come to the United States, you can become a United States citizen eventually. If you go to England, the same is possible. And then gradually, as you go farther and farther eastward, that seems to change into something else. So, and starting with even France, that even though technically you can become a citizen of France, the the people there are notoriously criticized by many outsiders as being less open to other cultures or more critical, um, to the extent that, as I've talked to many people who intend to learn French, their experiences with learning the French of France hasn't always been pleasant, because the French actually often are criticized for not being very open or accommodative of people who want to learn, toward people who want to learn their language, that they make fun of them and all kinds of things. Whereas the Germans, on the other hand, if you're learning German, overwhelmingly Germans are known for being willing to reach their hand out and kind of help guide you along the way. Um, Now, that's stereotypical to a degree, because it's not true of every single French person or German person, but it's also a general truth. It's probably more common than it is uncommon.
Yeah, so like, I mean, and when you think about like Korea, like there's more like Korean race, other than like other races, and there's more people who are 100% Korean like me. So they think like, um, if they don't look like us, like if they don't look like Koreans, they would like have a bias, of course, because like they would think like they would speak another language, or they would act like differently, or like that. So I think that's why they have more perception of other people and other races, or even some are born in Korea but who doesn't look like Korean. Um, but they all have like same mind if they are from Korea, and media is getting like developed it, and Korean also like getting noticed about like racism, and they are trying to accept like LGBTQ, or like different kind of backgrounds of people. So they will try, but it's not as like US, I mean, or even Canada. Um, they are like more race, and it's like pretty more common. Like let's talk about like the food. Like in Canada, there's more options, and there's always veggie options when you go to cafeteria or like restaurant. But when you go to Korea, like there's no veggie options, and it's more common. And like if you even have allergic to something, you cannot avoid it, because like they cannot. So there's like culture basis, but word is getting like more developed, and they will try to be like one, you know what I mean. So like they will try to not be like Korean, but like accept another culture. But we are not in final phase. We are just like starting phase. So I guess we have to do something more about like accepting other culture, or like race, or like that. But I cannot like stand all the Koreans, so it's my personal opinion, but I think we're just working on it.
Okay, let's see if we can't return to that theme and refer to the original topic, because we have deviated somewhat, but it's been interesting, um, to for me to experience what you're having to say about Korea. But okay, so hypothetically, you're in a relationship, and let's say that now, instead of just being in a relationship, you're married, okay? And so let's say that you intend to have a kid, and so what comes to mind? Priorities. What are some of the priorities that you have if you have the potential to move to different countries, let's say?
Mm, I think environment to learn new languages for me, because like I think learning new languages is really critical in their lives. Like when the time goes on, like there will be multiculturalism like way more than this era. And I think when you speak more than two languages, it can be like beneficial to you. So I would like to stay in another country that I don't speak like Korean. So maybe I will stay in Canada or whatever, but not Korea.
And why not Korea?
It is because like I can teach them Korean, and I guess they will get a lot of stress about their education, and so do I. Like I'm I've been to Korean high school or all Korean school, and it was like so stressful. Like I have to study like over like 12 hours a day in high school period, and I was so stressful. So I don't want my kids to spend a lot of times in study, and I don't think that's like worth it. So I would like to give more opportunities to like to play with other people and like try to do other things like adventure or something, not like studying. But Koreans, they prioritize like education, and they have to go to cram school, and they are worried about like students' life or like their credits. So that's why I don't want to raise my kids in Korea.
Okay, well, let's break that down some, because that's really interesting. And you mentioned education, which is also a really big theme, such so big that I included in the title. So, okay, I've looked into educational systems in the world, and so South Korea and Japan are always competing for like the top two slots as far as performance in education, which is really significant. So, for example, what that looks like is that the Japanese and Koreans basically make the score the highest of tests all across the world. And so there, of course, what that means is that like there's a substantial amount of effort that must be featured in the schools in order for them to achieve that every single year. So I knew that just from that I could tell or derive from that the school must be really stressful. And then it turns out that and you can kind of take apart anything I'm saying when I'm done, but and what that seems to look like is that there's another element to that underneath it. And Japan and South Korea are substantially different, but it seems like what they have in common is basically the grades that you make determine what college you can get into, and the colleges that you get into determine the the kind of job that you're going to get. Not in the same way that the West does. It's more like, okay, well, if you make the highest grades in high school, then you can get into the best colleges. And then if you get into the best colleges, then you make the most money across the board in a way that doesn't really exist in the West. I mean, now it does often happen, but there's a lot of potential for people in the West who don't perform well in school to make a lot of money, and it happens quite a lot. But it seems like there's actually a serious focus on that in South Korea and Japan, in a way that there isn't in Western countries, because those aren't Western countries. And so the South Korean kids and Japanese kids perform the best in the world as far as test scores.
Yeah, like basically like Korean moms and like Korean parents, they prioritize like education the most. And even for my parents, my mom is elementary school teacher, and my father is like principal in elementary school. So they really care about my credits in my school period, and they spent like $2,000 per month for my private lessons. So I was like, I have to make a lot of excuses when I get like bad score in my school. And also I went to like private school in my high school. So like I have to be the best student all the time to get into the best university in Korea. And like all of my friends did too. Like they are really like studious, and when the exam periods, they didn't like even sleep, and they studied like all day long. And some students, they pretended not to study, and like they study all night long, and they slept in school. Like I don't get it, but like they try to like get like more score than others, and make them to feel like special or something like that. And I got so much stress about it, so that's why I come here, and like I feel more freedom, and that's like better for my kids to take care of it. And yeah.
Okay, so for me, what that looks like is it gives me a sort of almost like a front row seat to the perspective of first generation, second generation Asian families, because there was a gentleman named Kenny Shu who actually was on a podcast with someone explaining why Asian families perform so well in school. Because now in Canada this is similar, but in the U.S., for example, overwhelmingly Asian students perform the best. Like they make the best grades, and this isn't a stereotype. It's true. The reason why that's so significant is they only make up around 5% of the entire population. And so what that ends up looking like is there's about 20% of Asian students that occupy the Ivy League schools, and but that's not right. The Ivy League schools actually discriminate strongly against Asians, and so if they didn't do that, the population of the Ivy League schools would look something like 40% Asians. But they discriminate against Asians like drastically, so that the kids who should be there aren't. And then there's also an effort to allow students into schools who don't make very good grades based on their ethnicities. So that normally, I think, has to do with African Americans, because African Americans perform less in the domain of grades, and so they make worse grades. And so I forget what the term is, but there's something called I forget what the term is, and I'll remember it later.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
I'll remember it later. Anyway, but the point is that Asians make the best grades, and they make significantly better grades than other groups, such that you kind of wonder why they do it. And so that gives me a front row seat to the perspective of what that kind of looks like, especially coming from Korea and Japan. Most of the kids that I went to school with who were Asian were either Korean or Vietnamese. Some were from like the Philippines, some were Japanese. I don't remember going to school with anybody that was Chinese. Um, I saw them in working in restaurants, but that was it. No one I went to school with was Chinese. They were all Korean, Japanese, or other. And so, but they always made good grades. They were always really, really smart. Um, and so I think that has a lot to do with it. Of course, they were also maybe first, second generation, so they literally came almost directly from Asia. There was one kid I went to school with who wasn't that. His name was Hogan. His mother came directly from Korea, and he would have technically been like second generation, but he didn't speak Korean, which I found very a bit a bit sad, considering that I had been to their house, and it was obvious to me that the mother was very much immersed still psychologically in her culture. Her whole house was decorated with these Korean ornaments and artifacts with the language it's inscribed on them. So it was shocking to me that he couldn't speak any Korean. But then it occurred to me that she was also a single mother. It's probably really difficult for her to do that. Anyway, so that's really fascinating to me, because coming from that background, you with the structure that would allow you to be as educated as you are, and then passing that down to your kids, would mean that the priorities that you have are starkly different from a person coming from the West, who maybe doesn't have that kind of discipline out of necessity as you do from coming from South Korea. And so for you, maybe the freedom that the West allows regarding the potential to be educated in numerous ways changes how you see what which places would be the best. So the hierarchy of places that you would consider to be the best for raising families.
Yeah, and also I really appreciate my Korean culture. Like, to raise a kid is not like it's not valid, I guess, because like when I grew up, like there was a lot of bullying stuff. Even though you're Korean, like they will judge you like how they look like, or if you're not pretty, like um you're like fat, or like you have like different perspective from another people, like you will get bullied. So like and it's like obvious to see in K dramas or like stuff, like some part of it is like true. So I think like to have more mature perspective, or like to have like open-minded, I think multicultural country is the best country to have my kids to have think like that, or like even they can accept a lot of different things and do a lot of activities. You can travel to another world, but when you live in Korea, they can only travel to like East Asian countries, so they will feel like same. But when you go to like US, or like even like Arab or like that, you can meet a lot of country people and you can communicate with them. So I guess like that kind of bonds makes you special and more open-minded, I guess.
Okay, I think Bullying doesn't change. Well, it does change. That's not true. I'll say formulate it this way: bullying doesn't go away. So it's more like trading your problems with other problems. So if you're coming from Korea and moving to the West, what you're also doing is trading the problems that are normative in Korean culture with problems that are normative in Western culture, specifically wherever that would be, whether it's the US, Canada, or England, or some other country.
Yeah, I know, but Koreans have more like limitation. Um, I don't know how to say, but like they have more. They have like high standard of like pretty person, or like they will make an excuse to bully someone. It's like common thing to have like bullying shit about it, but like when you comes to like Western culture, I've never been to like Canadian school like that, but like um it's like bigger school and they have more affinities, so you can accept more things, I guess. I don't know like it's true or not.
I don't think that they accept more things. I think everyone accepts different things. So, you, that's the thing. It's like, okay, if you come from Korea and you send your kid to a Western school, move to Western culture, you don't get rid of the bullying. The bullying's still there. It just looks different. And so, you have to kind of decide, how are you going to contend with this new form of bullying that you didn't grow up with? Now, that's not to say that it's a bad idea. Um, there are lots of reasons why people move from culture to culture, and one of that would be, well, you know, if you've dealt with the same problems in your entire life, maybe you'd have a fresh perspective, and you'd feel a lot saner if you had moved somewhere where the problems were simply different, and you were confronted with the challenge of facing those new problems, which is also an adventure. Whereas if you stayed in your country, you dealt with the same problems your entire life, you might end up becoming somewhat cynical. And that actually happens to people sometimes, especially if you look at certain people in the USA who've been here their whole life, and they've almost been become these sort of cynical old people that see the world so darkly. And I wonder how much of that has to do with the fact that they haven't experienced the rest of the world. Um, so it's not necessarily a bad idea. It's just that you'll have to understand that, okay, well, now your kid is going to face the world in a completely different way as you. And that's also partly a good thing, because that means that you're going to be confronted with an entirely different perspective, which is healthy. It's not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination, because there'll be lots of times when you're butting heads. But if you're open enough, you have the potential to learn about the West, and through a lens that you yourself wouldn't be able to, because you didn't grow up there.
Yeah, that's the thing, but um I don't know, like if my kids don't like the culture, then I will go to another country and move to live there. But unless that, like I try to like give them more thing that I never experienced. Like I always wanted to go to US or like Canada like earlier, and I want my kids to experience that thing. So yeah,
Why,
but
why the
if they
U.S.
don't
and,
like,
and Canada specifically? What about those countries appeals to you that much?
because like when I was young, I lived in Philippines for like 6 months, and it was like great experience.
Cut.
Hello? Oh, her connection.
Action.
Hello.
Hello, Sohyun.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just want to, I want to share something, but Anthony. So I'm never living Korean, but as I know, this the country is a little bit toxic through the high standard of the beauty, and that's true. And it's not easy to grow up and rise in that kind of environment. And by the way, your title, I like it. This chat room may be recorded, and that is true, guys. Hello, Tandem publisher or Tandem creator. I know you are hearing us.
Yeah, yeah. I just starting out having a conversation theoretically. Um, what would your priorities be basically if you were um, married and you had a kid on the way, or if you were intending to have a kid? And so she's
Okay.
from South Korea, so basically, from her perspective, um, she's been in Korea for a long time, and she, I guess, is kind of looking for a fresh perspective for her own kid, something that she wasn't able to experience herself. And just listening to what she was saying, it sounded like she wasn't satisfied with the negative aspects of her culture and wanted to exchange that with the West. And what I was just explaining to her is that the grass is never really greener. You're always trading something for another problem. And it's like, what are you going to do about that? And if are you willing to accept that? And if the answer is yes, then that's great. But if the answer is no, then you might be a bit unprepared for what may come.
Yeah, I heard that she wants to go to US or Canada to maybe have a new perspective or something for the education, for yeah, the future education to the child. I don't know why many, not all, many Asian look up to the US or UK or Canada. I don't know why, because yeah, me, personally I'm not, because but many. That's why maybe she have that kind of perspective,
Well, talking
because
with
yeah,
her, it's actually not that far fetched, and it's not that far fetched at all when you know how their education is. And so, coming to the U.S. and Canada, it's almost like the circumstances of what it's like to live in her country and grow up there are such that coming to the U.S. allows for extreme potential to compete against Americans.
yes,
And so what
that's true.
happens with as people, especially from Korea and Japan, is that they go to school with Americans and they just kick the living crap out of Americans in school because they can, and it's easy for them because the educational system in America isn't nearly as challenging to that of South Korea and Japan.
Yeah, 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 that's true. That's why I want to also agree with your opinion that about the bullying is everywhere. You cannot escape for that kind of situation, even though you are moved to another country or you move to the good school or like a fancy school or something. Bullying is there. So my point is the problem is not for the bully or just me. For me, for example, me, I'm the only kids that have a big. I mean, I'm fat when since I was a kid in the primary school. I'm the only one that at that time is like a alien. Even in the high school, it's also like that situation. So for me, I never feel that uh, s- everyone bullied me because I don't know. But maybe they bullied me, but I don't feel that. So I don't care. That's why I've never feel that I'm insecure with my body or something. Even now, yeah, I love my body, but most of people that have like a my size at my country, I'm a giant in my country, by the way. Even though maybe to American or something, I'm little small. That's why. So for the bullying, I think it's not big. The important thing is just to strengthen yourself. Just don't.
you have a right not to listen. They have a right to speak, and I have the right to not to listen. So it's not affected me.
Well, bullying is a bit complicated because it takes different forms across different cultures. That's why I asked her and pressing her on has she contemplated what bullying might look like in the West, because as she was describing Korean bullying, it's a lot different. Now every bullying has a basic premise that it's discrimination that's unjustified. Um, but beyond that, it varies a lot. And so the thing is, when you have experience in a country and you don't really notice that, and you probably don't think about it. But when you've lived in a country for 25 years, let's say you're 25 years old, then like you have a skill set presumably, if you're like a lot of people, you've probably developed some kind of skill set where you're able to contend with the form of, let's say, bullying that exists in your country. Now, if you decide to have a kid in another country, you're not really going to be able to help that kid as much as you might think, depending on which country you're moving to. If it's the difference between moving to from the U.S. to Canada, then you might be able to contend with that more easily because the two cultures are really similar. But if you're moving from Korea to the US or from Korea to Canada, that's starkly different. And so one of the problems you'll have to contend with is the fact that if your kid's being bullied, you might not know how to help them, you know? And so it's like, what do you do about that? Have you thought about that? A lot of people haven't. And she's a smart person, but there's a lot of factors that people just don't predict when regarding the moving from your life in one part of the world to the other side of the world. And some of these factors can't even be predicted, you know?
Cut. And action.
Hello guys, good evening.
Hello.
Moved to Canada in order to raise my family because I thought it would be more appropriate. I'm a Brazilian guy, but I had my kids in Europe because I lived there. And ultimately I chose Canada. And it is true that I guess you guys were talking about bullying. And this exists a little bit more than I would experience in Europe. My way to tackle this, well, it's just the way that my father did to me. Martial arts since the early childhood. Not only because you are going to be able to defend yourself, but also you will not bully others. You will make part of a community, a sports community. You will have a reference of people that are engaged in the community and help. So both of my kids, since they were literally 3 years old, they practice martial arts. And in this manner, they are not being bullied. I was never bullied. My brother was never bullied. My kids, never. You know, so that's, in my opinion, it's a very effective way to deal with this.
I like that. Yeah, martial arts is always a great idea. My brother's been doing Taekwondo for some time.
Yes, man, yes. It gives the kids confidence, the kids is practicing a sport. I don't know, I can only see advantages. Now, it's true that it is somehow, this bullying thing can be a bit toxic, right? But kids are cruel, you know. It's just the reality of things. They don't have, I guess they don't have life experience enough in order to correctly evaluate the weight of their actions or words. So that's why it's a huge problem. You know, it's sad what I'm going to say now, but my perspective of life is that, you know, that is everyone, don't wait for the school. They're not there to help you. They're there to maintain peace. They're there to maintain order. They're not there to help your kids, in my perspective, you know. If there is a bullying situation, the school suffering early, and the school doesn't do jack. I saw a very heartbreaking video of some students on a school conference or something. You know, one of their friends just suicide. Well, you know, they were saying that the school was notified several times that they, you know, and even if they wanted to do something about it, you know, the system is failed. So man, you cannot wait for others. You really need to arm your kids with some thick skin. And you know, that's life. That is how life works. You're gonna get punched, you're gonna bleed, but you're gonna survive, you know, if you're strong enough.
Well, let's break that down. So, starting out, the first woman in the party that I was talking with mentioned that she wasn't fond of the bullying that existed in her country, and she would want to give her kid the chance to experience a culture that she didn't have the chance to experience when she was younger. And so, well, it turns out that the priorities that people have regarding the best places to live to raise families actually has a lot to do with where they're from. And so for her, well, it might be in her interest to move to a country like Canada or the U.S., where, given that her life was so disciplined in Korea, the freedom that those countries offer allows for her the potential to compete against Canadians and people in the United States. So it leverages like things for her. But if you don't come from Korea and Japan, maybe the advantages aren't necessarily as immediately noticeable to that extent. And so, for example, regarding the education system of the United States and Canada, to me, comparatively across the board, they're not really that impressive. And so what that looks like is like the kids aren't really taught things in schools that are useful. The core subjects, as kids perform across the board, they don't really compete with other countries. And then there's always the danger of indoctrination in whatever that may look like. So there's a lot of reasons to dislike traditional schools. The advantages are socialization. At least with traditional schools, you have the ability to expose your kids to the good and the bad, and that's what you want to do if you want your kid to be competent. Because, like, I have a friend who grew up sheltered, and I know what that looks like. And in sheltered environments, the person grows up into another child, and so when bad things happen, they freak out a lot more. Whereas the kids who weren't sheltered and exposed to the danger immediately, and so if they had to contend with the bullying at first, and then learn how to deal with it early on, as the problems continue to bombard them when they get older, they're able to confront them more easily. But ultimately, it looks to me like there's a whole lot of disadvantages in the school system today, probably more than there are advantages. And to take that apart, what you said, that the schools don't do anything regarding the bullying that takes place in them. Well, most teachers are female. We know that statistically, like overwhelmingly, most teachers are female. And to me, why that's immediately important is that that makes schools, by definition, more feminine as masculine. So, regarding what to do about kids that are bullied, that's not their domain. That's not something that female teachers are good at doing or dealing with, especially as the kids become older, because then the kids become more dangerous. It's like, what are you going to do about a 16-year-old boy that's bullying a 13-year-old? What are you going to do about that? As a female teacher, literally, what are you going to do about that? And they don't know. That's literally the problem with that. They don't know what to do about that. And so what they try to do is they try to regulate the bullying with the school, with rules in the schools, and suspending kids and all that. That only goes so far, and then they make the mistake of actually publicizing it, so that they might make announcements over the microphone and that kind of stuff. And the reason why you don't want to do that is because you embarrass the kids, and so they really don't know how to deal with that. So that's why they really need like more masculine teachers in those environments that really know how to contend with the bullying and help the kids. Because what you don't want to do is protect them, because by protecting them, you make them weaker so that they're not able to contend with the bullying themselves. And that's what they need. That's actually literally what they need.
Oh my God, I'm so happy that you say that. Really, because it makes, it's just a logical, obvious explanation. I had quite recently two huge experiences that illustrate perfectly what you see about the lack of masculinity in the schools and how big of a problem this is. I could cite to you if you want, but I assume that you know a bit already. And I'm not a right-wing guy or anything like that. I couldn't care less about this. But the truth is, my youngest kid, for example, is not allowed to play tag. He's not allowed to pretend he's a superhero. Because I was, what? So what? He was literally forbidden to use his Superman t-shirt. Because superheroes are violent. He cannot pretend he's a superhero, he cannot run. He cannot play tag. So, what the it's really over the top. So I fully agree with what you're saying. This is not a healthy environment for kids, especially young boys. This energy will be released somehow. It's not that they can just erase it. So I could give you more examples, but we have a new guy here, Joel. Maybe you should say hi.
Yeah, hello guys. Okay,
Welcome.
I really appreciate your conversation about the bullying, and then some part I agree with Anthony's statement, but on the other hand, I disagree some part, because the bullying situation at school in Korea is not a problem when the bullying situation was revealed to school or to parents or to teachers. Actually, there is some special, the organization to, to handle this kind of issues, at schools. So once the school or the teacher or parents, they recognize some bullying, happens at school, they will take a really strict, the measure. Moving the bullying students, onto another school, or they will go through something very, the strict, the discipline, the process. So, I don't think, the bullying will be a serious problem once it, reveals. But, there is some, the circle just isolated from, each other. Like, among students, they have their own circle, the community. And then when the bullying, happens, and they try to hide the things happening, to a school or to parents, right? And then they threat the student who is bullied not to reveal the fact to school and to parents. That's the problem, actually. And then the bullied students just, get stressed by himself, and sometimes, as Lucas said, commit to suicide, right? That is a serious problem, actually. And then, when it comes to bullying, problem, I think wherever you go, you can, define the bullying issue at schools, every countries, right? It's not easy to root out the bullying situation because the students are very young and not matured. So they don't have decent way of thinking, or a decent, how can I say it, like a morale. So that's why we are here. I mean, to help them, right? As a parents or as a brother, as your relatives, as uncle, or as a students. I mean, as a teachers, as a school, right?
Okay, well, we were just talking about bullying specifically in the West, and that's the US and Canada. So that looks actually a lot different than Korea. I don't claim to know anything about that. There was a woman here who was talking about Korean bullying, and that's out of my domain. I really just ask questions and nothing further. But regarding bullying in the West, there is no organization that's going to protect your kids. And so announcing that your kid is being bullied is a terrible idea. That's the worst thing you can do, because you're signaling to other people that they're prey to be for other predators. So that's not a good idea. No one's going to protect your kid in the Western schools. It's a dog eat dog world out there, and if you look like a weakling, then that signals to other kids that you are one and that you can be taken advantage of. And so the best thing to do, if you're not someone who's, let's say, capable of like defending yourself or something like that, is probably to keep a low profile. And you do that by not engaging in the kind of behavior that makes you an easy target. And often just looks like keeping to yourself and not saying anything.
Guys, there is some accountability to be held by the school as well, because they should act in a more, I might not be able to say the word in English, but energetic maybe, or they should do something about it. So they do have a, there is no punishment anymore. I can't say really about here, Canada, because I just moved here 2 years ago, but I can say about Brazil. Absolutely would be done there by the school. They would probably do some like a broadcasting to everybody, that the kid is a victim, is a prey, humiliate even further the kids. It's just who wouldn't kill themselves, bro? So in my opinion, there is a huge accountability to be made. The schools, they don't do enough. The problem is that it extends in the West to much more beyond the schools. Or maybe the schools is just a reflection of